All right, Andrew, so you became a multimillionaire in your early 20s and a billionaire at 36. But what I find funny is we both went to Oak Bay, we went to the same high school, we both almost failed grade 11 math, and neither of us were popular back in high school. So what do you think, if your younger self from high school met you today, what would he think?
Well, I think the funny reality is, like, at almost any level of success, the younger you would be absolutely blown away. So if I told the younger me that I had a job and I was making like 40K a year, I'd be totally blown away. And I remember, like, I started out, I was a, university dropout. I was working as a barista, and all I wanted at that point was to be able to pay my rent, take my girlfriend out for like a nice dinner, and be able to go drinking and afford it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that first level was like probably the best. And then every level subsequent, it's just been like a slow, boring evolution. And so I haven't really noticed it. You also said, and it's been a funny ride for me, because you mentioned becoming a billionaire at 36. Well, I'm not a billionaire anymore.
Yeah.
Our stock went way up and then way down. And that too was a really interesting experience. But I think young me would be pretty shocked. Even me from 10 years ago would be completely shocked. Like, I remember, my dad would always talk about compound interest. He'd be like, if you just save $1 every day of your life and you invest it, and it compounds at like 10%, you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 60. And I was like, no, that's impossible. And when I started making money, I remember I sat down in Google Sheets and I was like, okay, so if I make a similar amount of money and it grows, 10 to 20% a year by starting businesses and growing the ones I have and investing my money, where will I end up in 10 years, 20 years? And I remember seeing this number. It was like $200 million. And I was like, that's impossible. Like, I didn't do the math right. And I'd hit that number within 5 or 6 years of that. So it's kind of a crazy experience to have that happen. Like, compounding is a very powerful thing. And I think, 20-year-old me or 15-year-old me would be pretty shocked.
Totally. What do you think was a belief that you had back then, maybe about money or life in general, that turned out not to be true?
One of the beliefs I had was just always, I had this weird self-confidence. I remember one of my friends he was an English literature major.
Yeah.
And I said, we were talking, and I've always loved writing. And I said, you can achieve anything you put your mind to if you have, the basic skills and the intelligence. If you apply yourself, you can do it. He's kind of saying like, no, I don't think so. I think you kind of have to be like a genius to, write the next great novel or whatever it is. And I said, like, well, I could write the next great American novel if I put my mind to it. Like, I think I could.
Yeah, for sure.
And, that's kind of hilarious and egotistical looking back. But I've just always had this sense that if I put my mind to it, I can figure out how to get there for whatever reason. And typically for me, that's just been getting obsessed. So whether it's learning how to DJ or starting a business, I get obsessed with things. I read every book. I figure out who all the best people are. I listen to all the podcasts. I get completely hyper-fixated on that thing. And what I've realized is I'm really good at getting proficient and not good at getting exceptional at almost anything. So like, I can get pretty darn good at most things, but I'm not good at the detail required to get to like exceptional level.
Why do you think that is?
Probably because I have ADHD.
Yeah,
but
same.
I didn't get diagnosed until a year ago. So before that, I just thought like, I'm just not disciplined. Like I would always think like, if I just have the right productivity system, or I read the right book, or I whip myself harder, I could be more disciplined. And probably about 10 years ago, I finally realized like I just don't have the discipline to even run a business day to day, right? Like I have so little focus that I get bored of something. The moment I get good at something, I get bored of it, and I have to move on to the next thing. And so I realized that made me a very bad operator of companies. I know what a good operator looks like, but I'm not one. And it makes me a good investor because I'm able to know what a good operator looks like, know what a good business looks like, buy it, put the operator in, and then get bored, move on to the next business. So for that reason, it's been positive. but it took a long time for me to take the ego hit of realizing like, wow, I really suck at details and I really suck at running businesses.
Honestly, I find with my ADHD, I'm definitely in a similar spot. It's like my mind's always just overflowing with new ideas, and I find like it's so easy for me just to bounce from thing to thing, but then hard to sit down and then like stay focused, follow through on something. But I think from reading your book and listening to you on other podcasts, like that ADHD and almost how you describe it, like not feeling like you're very disciplined, that's one of the biggest reasons why you've been able to find the success that you've had. It's like you've almost used that thing that might be negative as a positive thing. So how do you think you've been able to do that?
I would say I'm strategically lazy,
Yeah.
right? And that makes my life really good in a business sense. That's a gift in a business sense, where the moment I would do a task that I don't enjoy,
Yeah.
I'm lazy and I just go, I don't want to do it. I want to delegate that. I'm going to build a system so someone else does it, and then I'm out of it. And a lot of entrepreneurs struggle because they can't delegate. They are so obsessed with their business and they're so focused that the idea of someone else delivering the product or doing the thing almost physically pains them, and they really struggle. So I was good at dropping that, and I had this saying in the early days that I was Teflon for tasks. That my goal was that I really didn't have to do anything, and that I could disappear from the business at any time and it would keep running. And so what that resulted in was a lot of businesses that ended up growing a lot faster than they would have otherwise, because I didn't run them, because I wasn't very good at it. And so what's ironic though, in my personal life, that also makes me like a really frustrating boyfriend. So, I never want to take out the trash. I never want to do the dishes. It physically pains me to do anything boring. I hate playing board games, right? So it's kind of a funny breakdown in two different worlds. But yeah, it's turned out to be a gift when it comes to the business side.
That's a great point, the delegation. But I also think a lot of people listening to this podcast are people who are just starting out. Like they might not have their business yet. They might be more in the early stage of their business. What do you think you do if you were at that position where you haven't really grown your business too much yet to have the capital to be able to delegate as much as you want, to still delegate, and then
the goal of delegation should be that you take the time and you either make more money from your own time, so you're delegating the lower paid jobs and then you're doing the higher value jobs, or ideally you're actually getting your head above the clouds so that you're growing your business. So let's say your business, as an example, car detailing. So if you do all the jobs yourself, you know that you'll make a set amount of money, you have so much time, and that the product, the service will be exceptional because you know that you'll do it really well. But let's say that because you're detailing cars all day, you're not running Facebook ads, or you're not going and door knocking, or you're not thinking through pricing strategy or any of these things. And I think you need to delegate in order to get the leverage on your time. And it might mean making less money in the short term, but it's because it's freeing you up to actually think bigger. The hard part is, can you stay focused enough with your ADHD to not just start a new business, but instead actually improve the business you have? Because what I found was the business I started would be so exciting. The moment I started making money from it, that was like the hit of dopamine. But once it became routine, I really lost interest and wanted to move on to the new flashy business, not focus on the business I already had.
I definitely agree with what you were saying about the detailing. Like, I find on the days where all I'm doing is detailing cars, I'm just out there 8-12 hours a day, then I don't have time to do the sales. Leads start falling through the cracks. I don't have time to run the ads, do the pricing, like do the things that actually move the business. So even though I'm saving maybe $200, $250, $300 by not having someone do it, like I'm making a bit more profit, I'm losing out on maybe thousands from not doing the sales and doing stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's definitely a great way to think about it. So if you were someone who was 20 years old, you're starting out your first business, do you think you just be delegating from the very start?
Well, I did. I started, not the very, very start, but when I first started my original business, I was doing web design, and I didn't know how to program. And so I remember I got a programming job, like a contract with a company, and I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know how to program. What am I going to do? And so I found a friend of mine, he was a computer science student, and I said, hey, how much would you charge me per hour to do this work? And he said, I think it was like $30 an hour.
Yeah.
And I was charging $80 an hour. And I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I'm doing no work except for dealing with the client, and I'm making $50 of profit for every hour that he works. And from that moment on, I started delegating a lot. But anything that I knew how to do, I originally would do until I knew how to delegate it, or knew what a good designer, programmer, salesperson, whatever that was, looked like. And I think the fundamental, it's kind of like this chicken or the egg problem, where in order to delegate effectively, you have to know what the task looks like. So you have to detail some cars to know a good detailer from a bad detailer. But you don't need to detail 1,000 cars. You could probably detail 10 cars and know what to look for, and then hire accordingly. That's the hard part. And then the other hard part about delegation is you're going to hire usually a doofus the first couple times.
Yeah.
You know, you almost always hire the wrong person, or you hire your friend, and then you got to fire your friend and go through all that. And then finally, after 2 or 3 hires, you figure out how to hire that role. And so it requires a lot of pain, and it often means that people don't keep going. So like, they'll delegate the first time, it'll go badly, and then they go, I can never delegate again. You know, they teach themselves the wrong lesson. And I think the great entrepreneurs are the people who can push through that discomfort and keep going.
Yeah, well, I think the best way to view it is just through a lens of learning. Like, I've definitely made quite a few mistakes hiring wise, but I've learned so much from all those. And now I feel like I'm so much better at knowing what I don't want, which is great for knowing what I do want and actually finding the person. Let's say you're someone who's 20 years old and you wanna maybe start your own business. Like, someone who's 20 years old who's watching this podcast sees you and is like, wow, I would love to be where Andrew is, or just be doing what Andrew's doing. I was gonna ask, where's the first place you start, but what businesses do you think you'd completely avoid? Like, which popular businesses online do you think you just avoid if you're somebody who's starting out?
Well, I always think the first goal is to make $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
You know, Elon Musk didn't go out and start SpaceX. Elon Musk first did a whole bunch of other businesses, and he did some more boring businesses that were not trying to revolutionize space. They were, you know, Zip2 was like a Yellow Pages replacement or whatever. He made his first money doing that, and that, I call it building the rocket pad. You got to build the rocket launch pad before you build the rocket. And so what I would focus on if I was a young person is freedom. So having the freedom to think about businesses, or having the time, and you can't really have that freedom when you have a day job. And so I like the idea of trying to create a business that's relatively passive, or someone else can eventually run, that makes you $100,000 a year, maybe $150,000, whatever that number is for you. And then from there, starting to diversify and start other businesses or scale the original one. I think a lot of this comes down to personality and leaning into personality.
Yeah.
When I was young, I worshipped Steve Jobs. I was like, Steve Jobs is the greatest entrepreneur ever. I want to be just like him. I want to change the world. And I very quickly realized, I remember I read a biography of Steve Jobs, and I just thought, like, wow, I am nothing like this guy. Like, I am not detail oriented. I can't imagine running one business forever. Like, I'm not maniacal, and I don't want to be like demanding to people. I just don't relate to this person at all. And I realized that I had to find a business or a way of being in business that worked for my weird personality. And so I think some people, they are one-track entrepreneurs. They start a garbage hauling business and they scale it for 20 years and they take it public. Other people are serial entrepreneurs. They do one business at a time and then they sell it. Every 5 years they sell a business. Other people want to take big crazy swings. They go raise venture capital and go to Silicon Valley and they try and do something crazy innovative and sell it for a lot, or it goes to zero. For me, I ultimately realized that I'm not focused and I needed to do a lot of stuff at the same time. And so for me, what was right was starting a whole bunch of businesses, learning from that, and then recognizing, okay, I'm not a good operator. I'm going to start buying businesses. And now I do that. So the advice for young people is literally just to figure out, what is your operating system? Like, what hardware are you running in your brain, and what do you find enjoyable? And then based on that, you can figure out which of those many archetypes you are and who you relate to. So one thing I always recommend young people do is just listen to the Founders podcast. David Senra reads biographies and he summarizes them in about an hour. And through that, you can learn about hundreds of history's greatest entrepreneurs and go, oh, that, Warren Buffett, I'm like that guy. I want to be like this person. That's the archetype. Probably the most important thing that will define your success is how difficult and capital intensive the business model you choose is.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a young entrepreneur the other day, and I said, I think the most important thing is that you choose a business model for your first business where you get immediate feedback. So, for example, a difficult business would be you decide to go and start a new AI company that's going to build a robot, right? Now, maybe you're a super genius and you can go do that. But as your first business, that is a very daring, risky thing to go and do. And your first dollar that you earn as the founder is probably 3 to 10 years out, right? On the flip side, and you think about how easy it'd be to break along the way. It's so hard. You've never run a business before. All you wanted is to, maybe you wanted to make money or whatever the driver is. Now, on the flip side, your business, car detailing, tomorrow you can call, 3 friends and say, hey, do you know anyone that wants their car detailed?
Yeah.
You can go detail a car and you'll make your first $300 within 24 hours.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that choosing something simple is the best way to build your confidence and to also build your wealth. And so it doesn't matter whether that business is the thing you want to do for the rest of your life. I think this is a mistake a lot of young people make. They go, well, I don't want to be 45 and detailing cars, right? They think you have to be doing it in the end. And it's like, no, this is just where you're starting. They choose instead something glamorous. And I think glamorous businesses are hard because they're glamorous. Everybody wants to go and start their own clothing brand.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's really hard. It's time consuming, low margin. Everyone else is doing it. How many people want to go out on a cold February afternoon and detail cars? Not that many, right? And so you're going to instantly make money and be able to charge a lot for it. The analogy I use is like, you don't want to be the person that goes into the gym on day one. You've never lifted weights in your entire life and you try and deadlift 300 pounds. Everyone realizes that's stupid. But that people every day go and do that in a business context for their first business.
What do you think would be some examples of simple businesses?
So, anything that is like home services, very straightforward. Anything you don't need significant training for, where car detailing, window washing, pressure washing, anything like that, very straightforward. Doesn't require any licensing or insurance really or anything like that. The equipment is quite cheap. On the digital version, web design is a great example. Anyone who knows how to use a computer or ChatGPT now can figure out how to build a website with Squarespace or get ChatGPT to code something for them. All they have to do is find an old person who has a business that needs a website and say, hey, can I make a website for $1,000? I love that as a starting point. I don't think it's a great business long term, but it's an amazing way for you to first generate 5, 10, 20K and get moving with your business.
Right, and something I'm thinking right now is the home services are especially great because they're AI proof. And I'm seeing a lot of the popular online businesses, like AI is totally disrupting them.
You don't want to obsess over that because it's hard to predict, and if you really play out the AI stuff, it'll disrupt everything. But there is definitely a bit of a moat to home services. The one thing I'd encourage you to think about though is if lawyers, for example, or accountants don't exist in a world of AI, where do you think all those lawyers and accountants go? They all have families. They need to make money.
True.
Where when they freak out, where are they going to go? Oh, well, I'll be safe in the services business. I'll go into the blue collar industries. And then what happens when 1,000 lawyers go into that industry? The margins go down. You can't charge as much. So I don't think that's an overnight thing, but I think it's definitely a long-term risk for those businesses if you believe that AI will disrupt jobs.
How do you think somebody who's running one of those home service businesses can set themselves apart? And then, like, for example, for me, how can I make it so my brand is resistant to all the competition that comes in?
I think the only thing you can do is have a brand moat, aka be known as incredibly reliable.
Yeah.
Most people are not reliable. Most people don't pick up the phone. I mean, if you've ever worked with a contractor on a home renovation or a plumber or whatever, the bar is so low in terms of service that if you even have online booking, you're way ahead of the competition.
It's crazy.
Now, if smart people from other industries start competing, the quality will go up, right? When you see private equity has entered veterinary care and all sorts of other industries and started doing roll-ups, the bar is getting raised. People have higher expectations as a result. But that again, this takes time. I wouldn't obsess over it.
What are some other ways do you think that I could build the brand moat?
I think coming up with unique propositions like, if there's a single scratch on your car, I'll refund it, or we promise we will always show up within 3 hours, or you come up with like these things that are hard to compete with, that only you can provide, or other people don't want to provide for some reason. I think finding a way for people to become members, definitely, or have some sunk cost with you. Of like, I've already filled out like 6 of my 12 stamps, like I'm not going to go anywhere or whatever. And then again, getting into other services. So, we own a pressure washing business, and one of the things I talked to my business partner about was, can you also pressure wash their car? So, for example, when you go to do a pressure washing job for someone's patio, can you say, hey, if you park your car out front, pay me an extra $30, I'll do a quick once over of the exterior of your car, right? That's the sort of thing that people who are doing pressure washing are not washing cars, but the equipment is fully capable of it. So people are very simple. Like, they go like, okay, this guy shows up and I really like him. Plus, I always forget to wash my car and take it through the car wash. He does my car, right? That's not a long-term moat, but that is the sort of thing you can add on that will get people to choose you versus others.
And that's something also that it can make someone tell their friend, like, oh, I use this pressure washing company and they also wash my car.
Totally. It's a good one-liner.
Or something really dumb like, he always leaves this really delicious cookie in my car. Or, like something really simple. People are so simple in terms of the things that they love, these little details. There's a really great book. I think I recommended it to you off the pod, but it's called
I don't think so.
Getting Everything You Can Out of What You've Got by Jay Abraham. And it's about this exact same thing. It's like, how do you build customer loyalty? What are all the little details that keep people coming back and growing your business? And it can apply to anything pretty much.
How have you done that for your businesses in the past? Like MetaLab, for example. What were you doing in the early days to build customer loyalty?
This goes back to me not being a great operator, but instead knowing what a good operator looks like.
Yeah.
So, for example, like in MetaLab, one of the ways that we get business is by being incredibly useful and making like executives at big companies look good, right? So an example would be, like, let's say that we did a big project for some Fortune 500 or whatever.
Yeah.
We make sure we set up the executive so that they look incredible and we're not the ones taking credit. We're just quietly behind the scenes, right? So it's like thinking about how to make your customer look really good or give them pride or whatever it is. Stuff like that. I mean, honestly, like, I didn't do any of that though, right? Like, I haven't run a business fully since 2008. There's lots of little things that we do throughout all the different businesses. We own 40 companies, but I don't really know what a lot of them are, honestly. I've never been the person to implement any of that.
You haven't run the business yourself since 2008. So what were the steps that you took with that? Like, you went from running the business, and then where'd you go after that? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, after you fully stopped running the business.
So first business was MetaLab, which is a product design agency. So we would work with large companies and startups to build like web apps and software
Right,
and that
yeah.
sort of thing, some marketing and logo stuff. Basically what I did was I went away to Europe for the summer,
Yeah.
and I put my college roommate in charge.
Yeah.
I just said, you're good at talking to people. I just want you to send invoices. Whenever a client emails, I want you to get on the phone with them. Here's the projects that are going on. Just do your best. And it was totally irresponsible. I didn't know who else to hire. I just randomly took a chance on my friend Mark. And it turned out he was amazing. And so I got back after a month and a half away in Europe, and I was like, oh, the business is running just fine. And so I think I made him like general manager or something, and I was still technically CEO. But from that moment on, I really wasn't running the business.
Yeah.
And then I would only do stuff I really loved. So for example, like if we got a really cool client, I might get involved a little bit in the design or meet the client or something. But I pretty quickly got out of the day-to-day. And there was moments where I would come in and help with something, but for the most part, I just moved on to starting more and more businesses. So I started 2 software companies around that time. I started a Shopify software business shortly thereafter. Cat furniture business, pizzeria, skin care company, online DJ school, all sorts of dumb businesses as well.
What did your days look like back then?
I would wake up. I was a total night owl, so
Yeah.
I'd stay up until 6 in the morning usually, sometimes working, sometimes drinking and partying. And I would wake up at like 2 in the afternoon. I would do maybe like a meeting or phone call or something. I would go to the office for a couple hours, and then I would work in the evening, maybe have dinner with my girlfriend, and then I would just work all night basically. Or I'd party. It would be kind of 50-50. So this is the interesting thing about me is I was not, at the time I was working the most irresponsibly. I was growing the business the most. So
Yeah.
I was drinking 4 or 5 nights a week. I was working 4-hour days a lot of the time. And I was still able to be successful because I was delegating. And I think that's really horrible advice for most people. So I hope no one listening is like, oh, that's the way to grow a business. But ironically for me, that worked for whatever reason. I think because I was able to delegate a lot.
Yeah, that's crazy because the advice that you hear nowadays is like, oh, wake up at 5 a.m., take a cold shower, like live this super rigid life and work 12 hours a day. But then everybody has a different thing that works for them. That's really good to hear. Like even if somebody doesn't exactly follow that routine, like even if somebody just hears this and then goes along with whatever they're currently doing, it's still good to know like there's other ways to do these things. Like you don't have to act this certain way in order to find any success.
And you can hire someone else to run the marathon
Yeah.
for you, and you can be the coach, and you can provide the food and the housing, and you can sponsor them, but you can really create an incentive structure to have other people run the race and do
Right.
that work. And don't get me wrong, I am a very hard driving, extreme person in terms of wanting to get the outcome that I wanted, but I wasn't willing to make myself miserable. I've always, like, the realization for me is like, I've really only got like 4 to 6 good hours of work in me.
Yeah.
I don't find I can really produce that much, and I can usually get all the things I need done in 4 to 6 hours. I don't need to grind. I don't need to get up at 5 a.m. and do all Jocko Willink stuff and all this, whatever. So for me that worked. But again, it's like there's a quote I like. It's like these are the numbers I use to win the lottery, right? It's like I can give you those lotto numbers and you're a different person, and it may not work.
It's like the survivorship bias, like you were telling me about before.
My friend Rajiv has a good line. He goes, if 1,000 gazelles run across a crocodile-infested stream, and all of them die except for one, the gazelle that survives will go on to write a business book about how he's a genius at crossing streams or something like that, right? And you got to remember, there's definitely an element of luck and timing, and then winning like the biology, right? So having the right biology to be able to do that and have it work out. I don't know. There's a lot of things that had to go right in order for that to work for me. But I do believe that you don't need to do things you hate. You can delegate those to other people.
I think somebody might hear about the survivorship bias, and then be kind of paralyzed, like not really be too sure which path to go down, which advice to take. So when you're making a decision, how do you determine whether like this is just a freak case, like it's just somebody who found success but like a whole lot of other people failed, or if it's actually a viable path for you to go down? Because I remember one of your tweets, actually, it was like for every Jeff Bezos there's like 10,000 Jeff Bezos, and I think that's true in a lot of cases.
If you look at how intentional someone was and how much risk they took, you can kind of work backwards from there. So there's a lot of people who are crypto multimillionaires, and they have a lot in common with people who got called for jury duty, right? Yeah. They just got lucky. It was random.
Definitely a lot of Jeff Bezoses.
Jeff Bezos, right? But then there's also people who were incredibly thoughtful and had a thesis and went and did it. And, we worked with Brian Armstrong at Coinbase, and like in 2010 or whenever it was, 2011 when we worked with them, he was a true believer, and he had this vision, and he went out and he made the vision happen. And there's a lot of people like Brian who were not successful that tried to create businesses similar to Coinbase. I don't know that means he's lucky, right? I think that, but you have to reflect that he was fortunate to get the right investors, be based in San Francisco, get the regulatory approval when he did, become the default. There's a lot of things that had to go right for that to work. And I think what you want to do is just think about how many things had to go right and how lucky that person had to get in order to get where they are. And I think that when you look at someone like me, it's like I definitely had there's a lot of like, people throw around the word privilege. It's like, okay, I grew up in a household where people, I was loved, right? And my parents encouraged like reading, and they talked about business a little bit here and there. And I grew up I went to public school, but I went to public school with a bunch of rich kids. So I learned how to talk to rich people. So that already on its own is like this massive privilege, where it's like when I was doing web design and talking to people in business, I just knew how to talk to them naturally, right? So it's like I have all these super boosts, but at the same time, what I did, you can look at it and go, it's not that hard, right? It's not that hard to go and talk to business owners and see if they want $1,000 website, right? That's not that complicated. It's not that complicated to go on an internet job board for startups and email all the founders and be like, can I design your website? These are not 10-foot hurdles. These are 1-foot hurdles. So I think a lot of the things I've been successful at are relatively basic, in my opinion. And do I have a couple boosters? For sure. But I think most people can probably do them. Whereas to create Amazon or SpaceX, that's like, there's so many leaps that have to occur in order to be able to do that, that you have to be very careful with survivorship bias.
I think everybody, like you were saying, how you grew up in a loving household, grew up in Victoria, went to high school with people who are rich, etc. Everybody has those things in their life where they got lucky in some way. Like everyone has their own unfair advantages. And I think it's about finding those and then being able to play into those more.
Totally.
Yeah. What do you think were some other advantages that you might not have been born with, but you like developed, or you think you had naturally?
Most designers and engineers I find are very introverted. They don't like to talk. I love to talk, and I'm extremely extroverted. So I think I got lucky that I was okay at design.
Yeah.
But I could go and I could sell, and I could speak to anyone, and I had this weird the crazy confidence I talked about earlier, where I could go into a room with a CEO of a company where I don't deserve to be, and I could act like I did. I could, for whatever reason, I'd warp my brain into thinking that's just a person, and I'm just going to talk to them about how their day is going, and and that just worked for me. So I'd say that was a huge boost. And then the other one was reading. My parents didn't have cable, so they were like an anti-TV household, and we didn't have cable until I think I was 14 or so, and so I just read a lot, and my parents always, over and over and over again, would force us to read. It would just be like, no, there's nothing else to do. Here, we can go to the bookstore, we can go to the library, but we're not watching anything on TV. And so I think getting in the habit of reading probably is like the biggest thing, because I really have not found any great entrepreneurs that don't just read all the time. Or if they can't read, if they're dyslexic or something, they got to be consuming audiobooks or podcasts or something. They have to always be learning. If you're not a learning machine, it's like hard to be successful in business, I think.
Me doing this podcast, ever since I started this about 2 years ago, being able to speak to all these great people, I've learned so much from that, and that's been one of the best ways to learn. And even just like being in the proximity of other people who I want to learn from, that's been huge too. But in terms of reading, what do you think are some of the books that have had the biggest impact on you that you don't really hear too many people talk about?
Well, my favorite book, if there's one strategy or tactical book I'd recommend, it would be Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Oh, that was great.
And it is kind of a very high level overview of how psychology is used to convince people to do things, basically.
Yeah.
And it's probably the most powerful book I've ever read. Like, there's so many things that I apply on a day-to-day basis from that book. So psychology, writing. So there's a book called Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. And it is about how to write in a way that gets people to pay attention and never forget what you say.
I'll check it out.
And so that was huge. And then in terms of the story side, there's a book by Felix Dennis called How to Get Rich, which is absolutely incredible. And I think I remember I read that book when I was probably about 20, and in the book he starts out and he says, look, I made hundreds of millions of dollars and it ruined my life. You don't want to get rich. Here's all the ways that it ruined my life. But if you really want me to, I'll tell you how to get rich. And I remember reading that book and being like, whatever, old man, just like shut up and like tell me. And it's incredible because he was this random hippie who started selling kung fu posters, Bruce Lee posters. And then he somehow started a magazine and publishing empire that was a multi-billion-dollar company and was a very, very successful guy. But that book was so accessible to be like, wow, this guy's just some random dude, and he just cobbled it all together and figured it out. And I remember reading that and going like, okay, if this guy can do it, because like previously I'd read about like Steve Jobs or these like crazy like super genius level people. This was like, this guy's just like me. He's like a normal dude. And that was really impactful for me.
Are you glad that you didn't listen to what he said at the start of the book?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because it all comes true, and it's one of the problem with advice is you can't know it's true until you do it yourself. So there's an example. I was talking to a friend and she said, I broke up with my boyfriend. He's a narcissist. And I was like, oh man, that's hard. Like, I've dealt with a narcissist before. But I said, like, but imagine if like I had known he was a narcissist and I told you when you first started dating him, would you have stopped dating him? And she's like, well, no, because I wouldn't know what being with a narcissist is like. And so it's one of those things where like someone can tell you that something sucks, but it's really hard to read about something and truly understand it. And so like all the things he said about making money, that it's isolating, that it warps people's perception of you, that in many ways it makes your life more complicated and negative and complex to manage, all those things were true, but him telling me didn't register.
Yeah, you kind of had to find out for yourself.
Yeah.
There's been things in my life where like I really wanted them. I had this strong desire in the back of my head. Then it's like I have to actually get them to realize that I didn't really want them that much in the first place, or it's like they don't fill the hole that I thought they'd fill. You have to get to that place to know that for sure. I think I just don't want this thing, and then you stop pursuing it. There's always going to be that desire in the back of your head, and then you're not going to fully get rid of it.
Yeah, I remember I really wanted to buy a Porsche.
Yeah.
And it was like this thing ever since I was a kid. I remember my friend's dad owned a Porsche. He was like a successful guy, and he had this beautiful black 99, I don't know what model it was. It was in the 90s. I just always had it in my head that I wanted it. I always put it on my mood board, or not my mood board, my like vision board or whatever when I was a kid. And then I bought a Porsche and I got in it and I was like, whoa, the seats are really low, and like, whoa, it's really rattly, and like, it's really loud, and man, the stereo's not that good. You know, it's like all these things where I was wait, the car I had before that isn't as fancy was like better in so many ways. And I thought like, oh, girls are gonna love me having a Porsche. It's gonna be great. I realized like girls don't care about you having a Porsche, and in fact, the only people you get attention from are middle-aged men. You know, it's like some 65-year-old dude who's like, oh, nice car, kid. So I think like Morgan Housel has this great line where he's like, people think that they want what is it? It's like money, or no, freedom, respect, and love, and they don't realize that none of those things are related to money. That you can get all those things without money. And so it's like, for me, I definitely had this feeling of like, okay, I'm gonna make a bunch of money and then have this awesome life, and then I got a lot of money, and it was like, wait, like no, like having an awesome life actually comes from like cultivating an amazing group of friends, hosting events, like going to the gym and bringing groups of people together. Like it's not about having any money at all. In fact, it's almost antithetical to money. And so it's kind of this great irony that so many, especially young men, are like, I need to make money so I can get all these things I want. And it's like, no, you don't need it. But you kind of have to go on the journey to realize that.
What do you think was the dumbest thing you spent your money on when you first started to make money in your 20s?
I mean, I would just spend money because I could. Like, it was so shocking to me that I could walk into a store and spend like $5,000 and buy a new TV, that I would just like, every year I'd just be like, oh, I'll get a new TV, I'll get a new camera. I just endless gadgets and computers and all that kind of stuff. Probably the dumbest thing I ever bought was a Segway. I bought like one of those Segways because I was like, they're cool. And then I realized it looks horrible and it's like a ridiculous thing to own.
Like one of the ones kind of like a scooter?
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you realize pretty quickly that buying things is only satisfying if you have a deep need for it, like it has a real utility.
Right.
Or if you worked really hard for it. So it's not about the thing you bought, it's about the symbol. So I remember I bought my first BMW.
Yeah.
And that was like, I'd never owned a nice car before. And that was like, every time I drove the BMW, I'd be like, I earned this. Like, this is from all the work I did over the last 3 years. And that felt really good. But then buying the Porsche was like, no, it doesn't mean anything. You know, it's too easy. It's like, you could win a gold medal and like work for like 10 years to become an Olympian, or you could buy one on eBay. And if you go buy it on eBay, it's no fun, right? And so the moment that buying things becomes easy, it's not really enjoyable anymore.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I can definitely relate to what you're saying about the BMW too. Like, I remember I bought this Mercedes a few months ago, and then every time I saw that car for like the first month, it reminded me like, oh yeah, I worked so hard the past year for this. And then it was just a nice reminder of like how hard I worked. So that felt great, but then it's like after that the feeling starts to go away.
When you probably just go, oh, now I want the newer Mercedes, or I want the better Mercedes, or whatever, and that never really ends, you know. That doesn't go away, and so I think like for me, like definitely over the last 5 or 10 years, I've realized like no matter what, there's always this itch for more, and there's no perfect amount of more. You know, you can never satisfy. It's like ice cream. You don't eat ice cream and then go, I never want more ice cream. You know, you just keep being hungry, and so at a certain point you have to just stop and realize that it doesn't do it for you. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy an occasional bowl of ice cream, but you really don't want to become an ice cream addict.
How have you trained yourself to stop?
It's like candy. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I would eat an entire bag of Skittles. You know, like when you go to a movie, there's a massive bag of Skittles. I pound that. You feel really ill afterwards, right? Yeah. So I think part of it is being gluttonous and doing the thing and realizing it doesn't make you feel good. Interestingly, the thing that really made me stop spending money was medicating my ADHD, because I don't feel, a lot of people who are drug addicts or shopping addicts or sex addicts, there's something about their dopamine system where they feel this desperate need to dopamine seek and get that hit. And I think for me, I spent a lot of time buying random things or starting new businesses or whatever, because my dopamine system is fucked up. And so I found the moment I started taking Vyvanse, I don't feel that anymore. I don't feel like I need to go and, impulse shop, which is really interesting. So it's a bit sad to be like, I don't know that you can train yourself out of it. I think you can kind of like, if this is your default, I think you can shift your default a little bit, but it's hard to take it like this without medication. Like if you're a highly anxious person, you can meditate, and meditation will take your anxiety down a little bit, but it's never going to turn it off. It's never going to get it really far down, right? Because your set point is like here.
Just accepting like you have a problem with anxiety and you have a problem with ADHD. It's like that's the first step.
A lot of those things are vitamins, not painkillers. Like they help, but they don't solve. And I just found taking the pill for ADHD was like complete revelation. Like my anxiety used to be a 7 out of 10, like all the time. And now it's like a 1 out of 10 probably. And that's 100% been medicating the ADHD. And that's shocking to me, right? Because I spent so much time neurotically thinking about all the things that I could do. Okay, if I just eat right and I meditate and I go in the sauna and I use a vagus nerve stimulator and I do a cold shower, you start building this checklist.
Well, I think the stress of that is like so bad for you as well.
Totally. Well, yeah, you're just constantly. I mean, I look at my gray hairs that have come in, and I look and I'm like, okay, I bet I'd have like half the number of gray hairs if I'd just been medicated earlier.
One tweet that I saw that I found was super interesting was you said having the courage to be disliked is the greatest trait of successful entrepreneurs.
Well, I would say it's mostly a trait of happy people.
Trait of happy people.
Happy people and great entrepreneurs. I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to endure people thinking you're an idiot for a while. Like my parents definitely were kind of like, okay, like, are you paying your taxes? Like, what's going on? What's this business you're doing? Like, should you go get a job for the first 5, even 10 years? And you get a lot of people, you feel like an idiot. I mean, I certainly did. Like, I remember my friends were all going to university, and they were all learning about cool, interesting things and partying and having all these neat experiences and going backpacking. And I was working, and I was like, man, I'm like missing out. What am I doing? Like, but then when they graduated university, I owned my own house, right? And it was like, okay, that worked. So I think having the courage to deal with that discomfort and having people criticize you a little bit is really important. That also applies in your personal life. So, I don't know. I mean, let's say that let's use an example. Let's say you're gay, right?
Yeah.
And it's 1985. Very inconvenient time to be gay, right? Yeah. It's not, AIDS, people are scared of you. It's accepted, but it's not totally accepted, right? It's still kind of underground. You don't tell your family, whatever. Are you going to have a happier life if you're closeted or you're openly gay? Right? I would argue probably you're going to have a way happier life if you're openly gay, but you're going to be disliked. It's going to be miserable in a lot of ways. And I think having the courage to choose that harder path and be out about whatever belief it is you have or however you want to live your life is really important to your own happiness. And I know a lot of people who don't do the thing they authentically want to do because they worry about shame and judgment from society.
Do you think there was a point where you were holding off making certain big decisions, or you were holding yourself back a bit because you're scared of what people thought?
Tons. I mean, I started a business in 2009 that was a project management software, and it was kind of like Asana before Asana came out. And I decided that I would bootstrap it. I'd fund it all myself. And for years, year after year, the first couple of years it was growing a lot, and then it started flatlining and slowly not doing very well. And my ego wouldn't allow me to shut it down and admit defeat. I just kept pumping in $100,000 a month every month, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for a little bit of embarrassment. But I couldn't address the fact that it wasn't working. And I would argue with Chris, my business partner, and say, no, this is going to be $100 million business and all this stuff. But there was no evidence for that. I just was protecting my ego. And so I ended up losing over $10 million because I didn't have the courage to be disliked and make a hard decision. And I think that same thing applied a lot with working with the wrong people, hiring friends. I mean, I didn't fire anyone for the first 6 years of the business, ever. People laughed. Or, people would kind of like transition out or whatever, but I never sat down face to face with someone who needed to be fired and fired them. And that was because I didn't want to be disliked. I'm a people pleaser. So for me, I've really had to work on having boundaries and asserting those things, and realizing that there's a really great quote on this. It's easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life.
Yeah.
And I think that sums it up perfectly, that often if you choose the easy path, you're going to have more misery in the long term.
Yeah, fuck, I definitely struggle with that as well. That's one thing I've been noticing lately, now that I've been running my own business, and now that I've started to hire people. Like, my people-pleasing brain and, like, the people-pleasing part of me is really starting to come out. So that's definitely been a huge thing I've been working on lately. And how did you get better with the people-pleasing side of things, especially in business?
So what I did is, one, you fire your first person and it's horrible, and then, but you realize, like, the world didn't end, right? So for me, I think I fired somebody in like 2012 or something. I started my business in 2006, so it was a long time. I finally did it, and it was a friend, and I sat down and I said, hey man, I realized I could frame it in an empathetic way.
Yeah.
And I said, I care about our friendship, and our friendship is being damaged. Our friendship is more important than working together, and our friendship is being damaged. And I think that even though it was hard and, it wasn't an easy conversation, I think in the long run, I was honest and he understood, even though he's a bit pissed in the moment. And I realized that, it was okay. And so I would slowly over time get comfortable with having hard conversations with people.
Yeah.
And sometimes I had people who were complete assholes, right? Like, where I'd have a hard conversation, not firing someone, but just negotiating something or having boundaries, and they would blow up. And I was over time able to get comfortable with that and deal with it. And I think it took me until 2 or 3 years ago, I actually went to therapy to try and learn how to say no to people. Because I would get someone that would text me and they'd say, please, can we go for coffee, or whatever it is. And I go for coffee with lots of people, but there's some people I just don't want to, or I don't have time, or I'm too busy, or whatever it is. And I couldn't say no. I'd always say, oh, maybe in a month or whatever. And then a month later I'd be dealing with it or whatever. And so I really had to work on myself just to be able to say, like, no, or like, I can't, which is awkward if you're a people pleaser. So it's been a 20-year journey to learn how to say no.
Dealing with it mainly through exposure, right?
Totally. One trick, if you're really struggling with it, is there's a pill called a beta blocker, which people take for public speaking or for anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
And when you take a beta blocker, your body doesn't have the physiological response to anxiety that you normally would. So, when you're like stressed out, let's say you're like in a room with a tiger, your heart's going to start pounding, your palms are going to start sweating, you're really scared. If you take a beta blocker, you'll have no reaction. You might mentally be like, oh my God, there's a tiger, I need to be careful, but you won't have that physiological reaction. And so what I've done a few times is, when I have difficult people I'm dealing with, I'll take a beta blocker. And they've done studies where if people are scared of spiders, for example, they'll give them a beta blocker, and then they'll put spiders on their arms. And after they do that, they're not scared anymore. So it's a neat trick for people that are really, really intimidated by these difficult conversations. You said earlier how for maybe the first 5-10 years of your business, your parents were telling you to go get a job, or they were being kind of doubtful of that. It actually lasts like 5-10 years, right? Yeah, I wouldn't say they were saying go get a job, but it was definitely like they're nervous about it. They're nervous about, will I be okay?
Really?
Am I going to be financially stable? Am I going to blow up?
How'd you deal with that back then? Because you started finding success pretty quickly in business, right?
It's interesting. I think like people are quite simple. It's like their perception of wealth is usually like, do you drive a nice car and do you have a nice house?
Yeah.
Right? And so I feel like my parents, it was like, as they'd come over to my house and my house is nice, they'd be like, okay, like he couldn't have a house unless things were kind of okay, right?
Yeah.
So it was real. But my dad had his own business and he really struggled with it.
Yeah.
And he almost went bankrupt. So I think he just applied all of his anxiety to me. He just didn't want that for me. So he was always saying like I remember I called my dad like 2 years in or 3 years in, and I was like, Dad, I just did my year end. I made $250,000 of profit. And he goes, oh my God, did you pay the taxes? Like that was the first thing he thinks of, not, wow, son, congratulations, I'm so proud of you. And I don't, it's not like he's a jerk or something. It's just he was so tuned for anxiety. Business equals stress equals risk. So it took a while for him to calm down.
That's also a huge thing that everybody has to deal with. Just people in their lives, and maybe they don't necessarily doubt them, but it's like maybe they're just worried. They have anxiety for them, and I think like it's so important to. It's important to listen when you have people like that, but also I think not taking the anxiety and the worry and the doubt to heart.
There's a great Francis Ford Coppola quote. It's the story of the father is embedded in the son. So for me, it's like my dad, he kind of struggled in business, and I was like, I'm not going to struggle in business. Mm-hmm. But then his fear from that plays out in his reaction to it, right? But he created me. The reason I'm even interested in business is because I saw him run a business, and he'd always talk about business, and I helped him, I would always go to work with him, and right. I have all these affinities for it. So it's interesting to see that play out over and over again with fathers and sons and mothers and daughters and all that kind of stuff.
You said there were 2 skills that were essential for having success in business, and they weren't knowing accounting or spreadsheets. They were 1, psychology, and then 2, it was dealing with tough people. Mm-hmm. Something along those lines. I can't find it here on my phone, but I really want you to go into the first one, psychology. So what do you think are some of the psychological biases or some of the things that you learned psychology-wise that have really helped you in business?
Well, mostly it's been spotting my own poor thinking, right? So, for example, sunk cost, right? Yeah. So the example I gave earlier of, well, I've already put $5 million into this failing software business. I might as well keep going, right? I'm already too far deep, right? There's this study where they would, what was it? It was like someone is more likely to go see a movie they don't want to see if they already have a ticket, even though they'd be happier just lighting the money on fire and doing the other thing. And I think a lot of people do that in business with projects or businesses they've started where they've told all their friends that they're going to go do this thing, and it's like it forces them to do it. And that can be really positive. Like I often do that whenever I'm starting a new business. I talk about it, I make it real, I give it momentum, I tell all my friends to force me to do it. But that can also be very dangerous on the flip side, because it can lock you into doing something you don't want to do, and right. You won't stop because I told my parents I was going to be a CPA, so I can't quit accounting school. I'm going to let them down, right? Those things. One thing that is also incredibly powerful is anchoring. So if you go in, let's say somebody comes to you and they say, I'm selling, let's say this microphone, I'm selling you this microphone, right? If I start the negotiation, let's say the microphone's worth, I don't know, $1,000. I go in and I say, Sam, I want $3,000 for this microphone, right? You're like, dude, what the hell? That's crazy. Like the most I would ever pay is $1,500. Because I said $3,000. You never would have said $1,500. You probably would have said you'll pay $300 for it. But I've anchored you at $3,000, right? And I find that's very powerful for negotiation. I think of these things as dark arts, though. I try not to use them unless they're for good. But I often see these things being done to me. And what's crazy is Daniel Kahneman, who's probably the most famous scientist in this space, who did so many of these studies. He famously said that he knows them all, but he's still vulnerable to them. So I think what's crazy about some of these heuristics and stuff is you can know them, but the dark arts will still work on you, right?
Right. Well, because I think they're so embedded into our psychology.
So another one is contrast, right? So let's say I'm a realtor. I take you to 3 houses. I take you to an incredibly fancy house you can't afford that's way too nice.
Yeah.
I take you to an absolute shithole that is horrible that you'd never want to live in. Yeah. And then I take you to one house that's okay. You're going to think the house that's okay is amazing, right? Because I've anchored you. I've put your hand in cold water, then I put your hand in hot water, then I put your hand in warm water, and you're like, oh yeah, this is just right. So that contrast forces you to make bad decisions sometimes, or think like, well, that's all that's out there. Like these are like, I think part of why understanding psychology is so important is because when you're in business, you're going to deal with a lot of employees, and employees need to ensure that your employees are happy and they feel taken care of. And a lot of that is obviously psychology, but then also you're going to have practitioners of the dark arts like psychopaths and narcissists who you're going to be doing business with.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to see through the tricks and see through all the things that they're going to do. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of wonderful business people out there, but you're going to deal with very difficult people at some point, and knowing how to deal with them is very important.
So I find, for me personally, I think part of the reason might be the fact that I grew up here in Victoria, and a lot of people seem to be very trusting, but I find I'm way too quick to trust people, and I'm a very naturally trusting person, which works well until it doesn't. And it's like there's always going to be those bad people in life, and especially in business. So how do you figure out who those people are from the start to just avoid them completely? Or like, what are some red flags that you watch out for, or you've learned about from experience?
So I'm the exact same way. I remember watching I'd watch like superhero movies, and there'd always be like the evil bad guy, or like, in like Harry Potter, like Voldemort, right? And my take was always like, oh, there's no such thing as bad people. There's just misunderstood people, right? I'd never witnessed evil. And I heard the word psychopath, but I didn't really know what it meant. I thought maybe it's like someone who's crazy, like Hannibal Lecter, like a serial killer or whatever. And the reality is that psychopaths it's about 5% of the population, but there's a very wide swath of degrees of it. Now, on the extreme degree, you have serial killers, but that's like a tiny percentage of psychopaths. Most psychopaths are totally normal people who exist in day-to-day world, but they just feel zero empathy for others, or varying levels of empathy. And in a lot of ways, it's like a superpower in business, because they can basically manipulate people or mess with people and feel absolutely no consequences whatsoever. Where if you or I did that, we chisel someone, or charge someone too much, or do something horrible and unethical, or insert something into a contract, we would just feel guilty and horrible. Like, it would be really negative for us, right? So these people generally, because they're so they feel no empathy, they can rise very quickly, and they can be very impressive, and they usually are not the most successful, because generally society does not reward these people in the long term, but they're really freaky because they can be highly manipulative, and they can convince you to do things that are against your interest. And so for me, I was incredibly trusting. I was going through a period of high anxiety. I was very stressed out at work, and I met this guy who was really charming and helped us out with a bunch of projects. And I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, I can't diagnose, I have no idea, but I just say, like, I felt he was not a good guy, and was not truthful about a lot of what he told us. And so I learned the hard way that there are bad people out there, or that there are people that will lie or be Machiavellian and all this kind of stuff. And so I think you kind of have to learn, just like the narcissist example, right? If I told you, like, beware of narcissists, you probably won't know what to look for or even care. If you date a narcissist or you do business with a narcissist, you'll learn pretty quick not to do that again. And I feel like I've had enough experiences in business that I can start to see certain archetypes of people and just go like, oh, I don't want that pain again, right? And you might get lucky. You might just trust people your whole life, and you probably will mostly get lucky.
But it's like, you don't want to rely on that.
No, but so for me, where I came to was trust but verify. So, for example, if you're going to do business with somebody, call the people that they work with that they don't put on their references. don't take their version of events as true. If they say, oh, my last company, the reason I left was because my co-founder was a terrible, terrible individual, whatever, and they're vague about it, you might want to call that co-founder and suss it out and just see what they say. You might want to look in the court registry and see if they've been sued before. If they've worked a bunch of jobs, you want to call the references that they don't give you, not the ones they do give you. So we do like a much more extensive process of background checking and sussing people out before we do business with them or before we hire them. And that has come out of just the experience of getting our hands burned so many times that, it's no fun. But life goes on, usually,
If you could go back to when you first started doing business with that guy, I remember you spoke about him in the book. What do you think you'd look out for, or what red flags do you think were there that you might have ignored?
Well, in that particular, that's actually a different one. There's so many characters that we've dealt with over the years. The one in this story, in my book, this guy named Brian, the red flags there were he showed no emotion, no authentic emotion. So that's going to sound funny, but it's like he was never nervous. He always had an answer for everything. He didn't sweat. He wasn't. I really, when I do business with people or I hire someone, now I really look for authentic emotion. So I want the person in the meeting to have their hands sweating and they're a bit nervous, or they give the wrong answer, or oh, I feel dumb, or they're blushing or whatever. Because a psychopath or a narcissist or any of these characters, they don't usually exhibit those signs. They have such high confidence in themselves, or they feel so little stress about things that they don't show those things. And so when someone's too shiny, when someone's too impressive, when they're too silver-tongued, when they always say the right thing, I'm always a bit nervous. And it doesn't mean, don't get me wrong, I've worked with lots of people who are just like so charming, but where I want to see them is I want to break past that, and I want to see their warm, gooey center at some point. Right? So there's people that like, you could talk to them 10 times and they're like so on, but then eventually they're like, oh man, like, I'm really struggling with my girlfriend, or there's something deeper going on, or, you see their soft spot. I always want to see people's soft spot to see that they're like human.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. And once I remember I was speaking to someone and they were like, yeah, I'm just in business to make money. Like, I don't really want to help people out. And just hearing that, even though that technically wasn't the correct answer, like the more socially acceptable thing would be like, oh, I'd love to help everyone. Like, hearing that made me trust them so much more.
Totally. I think that is actually an interesting example of like somebody saying something where, I mean, you got to be careful. So one thing with someone who's psychopathic is they might say, have you ever seen like Goodfellas or like mafia movies?
I have, yeah.
There's always like a scene where the mobsters are telling a joke and it's like a horrific joke that a normal person would never say. Right? It's about murdering someone, or they're talking, saying something really dark. Those sorts of things are always good tells for someone who's a psycho, because they say a thing that they don't realize is crazy or that's dark, right?
Yeah.
Like they laugh about it. They laugh too hard at a really horrible joke about, somebody's misfortune or whatever it is. And it's like, because they don't have the empathy. And so I think like the money example is so interesting, because it's like, they could be saying that in a cold way, or they could be saying like, you know what, like, to be honest, I just care about making money. And like, what I would be curious to pull on is, well, why? Did they grow up poor? Did their parents fight about money? Did they really want to buy a house for their mom? Or is it truly that they're like, I just want to be rich and powerful, and I want to control people, and I want to be fund corrupt politicians? It's like, those are two different options from the same answer, but one is much more humanistic.
Why do you want to make money?
Well, the answer I always give is that my parents fought about money when I was a kid, and so I just wanted everyone to stop fighting. Separate from that, I would the most I would fight with my mom would be, she would tell me what to do. She wanted me to clean my room. I didn't want to clean my room. She wants me to do the dishes. I don't want to do the dishes, and I'm incredibly stubborn. And so to me, money represented the ability to not have to do the things I didn't want to do. And so for me, it was really like freedom, and then wanting to take care of my family. And ironically, I'd say like, I was able to take care of my parents and do some of those things, but I wouldn't say it necessarily solved anything, in fact, it makes life kind of more complicated with family and money and all that kind of stuff.
Was there a reason why you wanted success or why you wanted money at the beginning that went away, or maybe something replaced it?
Oh man, I mean, I think like every young guy who's in business is like, if I get a nice car, girls will notice me. You know,
Yeah.
it's like there's always that part of you. I'd say that was definitely a piece. And then it was like, man, I want all the stuff that the rich kids I knew growing up had, right? So it's like, oh, I want a nice car, I want a nice house, I want to be able to go on a trip to Whistler or go to Maui or you know, these things. And over time I realized, like, you know, those things are nice, but they're not that meaningful. And I'd say I just cared a lot less about all that stuff. I don't know, like I don't work for money right now. I work because I find it interesting and fun, and I get to meet great people and manifest ideas. And that's very different from the early days. In the early days, if you told me that if I worked, you know, 8 hours on something I didn't enjoy and I could make $5,000, I would jump in a second, because I was very money motivated.
Going back to what we were talking about before, like someone saying like, oh, I'm just starting my business to help people, or like I'm just starting this to make money. I saw one of your tweets. You were talking to this guy who ran their own marketing agency, and they were saying how they love to help nonprofits, or their marketing agency is built to help struggling businesses. And then you were saying, no, focus on the profits now, and then help people long term. Have your thoughts on that conversation changed at all?
No, I mean, I meet a lot of people where they say something like, you know, I think in that example, it was like someone who ran a marketing agency, and they were saying like, I really want to work with small local businesses and nonprofits, because they're the people that need the help most. And I said, well, you know, why not work with the biggest possible companies and then just donate money or time to those organizations, right? Like if you have the capability, let's say that you can either help, I don't know, let's say you can work with 5 nonprofits, you'll be broke most of the time, you'll barely make any money because you can't charge that much, and you're trying to do a good thing or whatever. You'll help 5 nonprofits, and maybe every year you'll make, you know, 500 grand, and then your profit will be 50 grand, and you'll live off the 50 grand or whatever. Or you can scale up your marketing agency, you can make $5 million a year, you can work with startups or bigger companies or whatever, and then you can make $2 million of profit, and you can decide what to do with the $2 million of profit. And if you really believe in helping people, you can use the full $2 million to go and help people, and you have a secure functioning business that has profits that'll survive downturns, where you can pay people really well, etc., etc. I'm a big fan of using capitalism to do good, and I don't think that you need to make money in a way that's necessarily like kumbaya, right?
Yeah.
It should not do anything bad in the world. Your product should not rip anyone off or be negative. But I don't think that, you know, there's anything wrong with just making a hell of a lot of money from business and then giving it away, or doing the philanthropic projects that you want to do. And so that was the advice I gave them.
You can't pour out of an empty bucket.
Totally.
How did your dating life change after you started to make money?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say, it's funny, like, you realize pretty quickly that, you know, girls don't notice cars. You can't really go around saying like, hey, I'm a really successful, wealthy guy, unless you want to be an asshole.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this thing of like, well, how do you communicate your value? And I remember I used to go to this club all the time, and my friend was the DJ, and girls would be going crazy for the DJ. And you look at it and it's like, this guy's getting paid in like free beer and like $30 per night, but he's on stage and he's DJing or whatever, and the girls are crazy about him. And I'd be sitting there going, man, like, you know, I've got all these businesses and I've got so much to offer, and no one knows. And I think that's kind of the hilarious conundrum. I know so many very wealthy, successful guys where they can't meet women because there's no way for them to communicate that. And I realized for me, ultimately the way that I had success with dating was building my own confidence and being an interesting person. And so, you know, being able to have a diverse friend group and be able to meet a girl and invite her out to an event or something like that, and be emotionally intimate and curious with somebody and ask questions, I realized that's the route to a woman's heart, not impressing her with a fancy car or wealth or something like that. And so as soon as I got the confidence to just like see a beautiful girl and walk up to her and ask her a lot of questions, and then not appear as a creep and have a nice life, that went a long way. But I never experienced, like, certainly not in Victoria, any kind of like girls showing interest just because of who I was.
Did you have to work to develop that confidence, or was the confidence with women something you've always had?
Well, my mom my mom really wanted a girl and didn't have a girl, and so she always talked to us about emotional stuff.
Right.
Not that she, a mother wouldn't, but my mom was very open. And so I learned early to get good at talking to adults and to women. And so I'd always talk to my friends' moms or whatever, and I always got along really well with women.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was never a problem at all. Like, I've always been very good on first dates and stuff. What I struggled with was being in a bar and seeing a girl and having the guts to go and say hello.
Yeah.
And I think I always found, like, if I was in a social group, let's say I went to a dinner and, some beautiful girl came and she's a mutual friend, I would have no problem connecting with her, asking for her number, all that kind of stuff. But if I was in a bar and I saw a girl, I remember, like, when I was newly single, when I was 22, I was in a bar and this girl looked at me and she, like, flipped her hair and it was kind of like looking over at me. Yeah. And I was literally going in my head, oh, I wonder if she'll come over and talk to me. It's like I just had no idea what the rules of engagement were. And so I had to learn how to go up and say something and, get to the point of being able to talk. And then once I could talk, I was fine. But that was challenging. And
I feel like part of that is, like, being okay with being embarrassed and saying something stupid.
Well, and it's crazy. Like, I still struggle with this, even just if let's say I'm on a plane and I get seated next to someone, just a dude or anyone I want to talk to. I still have that little tiny bit of social anxiety of, like, oh shit, like, if I don't say something the moment I sit down, it's weird if I say something later, and what if they don't want to talk to me, and what if I get rejected? And I think one of the most impressive traits I see in friends of mine is the people that can go to a cafe and just, no matter who's standing next to them, they can, like, start talking to them, make them laugh, male or female, just like making friends and being social, I think is such a great quality. And it's something that I really try and work on myself, of just, like, always talking to the person next to me no matter what. And sometimes you get rejected. I went to a workout class recently, and there's this woman, and I wasn't flirting with her at all. She was just standing next to me at the station, and I said, oh, what do you do, and what are you up to today? And it was so clear she didn't want me to talk to her.
Yeah.
She just kind of was, like, not into it at all. And it was a little embarrassing for me and a bit uncomfortable, but, like, yeah, I'm glad I still did it,
I think a lot of that is, like, having the victory with yourself, like being able to overcome your fear and your social anxiety, fear of embarrassment, etc. So it's like, even if you are rejected, even if, like, the interaction doesn't go anywhere, like, you still got over your fear and you still won mentally.
Well, and also if someone, I remember there was this girl, I was out at a bar and I walked over to this girl and said hi. And she just looked at me and she just said, fuck off, right? She literally, no joke.
No way.
No
really?
joke. And I was like, whoa, like, I definitely been rejected like that and just walked away and been like, whoa, okay. But with her, I was like, whoa, like, that was harsh. Like, are you okay? Like, are you having a bad night? And then she actually softened towards me. It was like, yeah, like, I'm sorry, like, my friend did this and we're fighting and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I ended up talking to her all night, and it's like
Wow.
I feel like often when people are harsh, it's because they are having a bad time, or think about it. Think about how annoying it would be if you were a beautiful woman and you're at a bar and annoying guys, you're just trying to have fun with your friends, and every 30 seconds some dork comes over and is like
five guys staring
trying
at
to
you.
say an opener or something like that. So I think I get it. I think usually people have a reason or they're going through something. So fair enough.
Totally. Yeah, just That's a great way to put it. Understanding people more, putting yourself in other people's shoes. And I was seeing a reel about that a few days ago, which was super interesting. The guy was talking about how it's important to always be viewing situations from the other person's point of view. It's like that's so simple, but just asking yourself, like trying to figure out how they're feeling, and then feel those same emotions.
When there's been times like I'd say like once a month, I'll be sitting in a coffee shop and someone has like seen me on My First Million or something, and it's always fun, right? It's always like some business nerd comes over or whatever. But there's been times where I'm like in the middle of something, or I'm talking to my girlfriend, or I'm stressed out about a problem, and I'm kind of like, hey, nice to meet you, but I'm kind of abrupt or whatever. And it's like, yeah, like everyone has those moments where it's just bad timing or whatever, right? But yeah, I think like learning to overcome rejection is very important for dating, because you never know where you're going to meet your future partner. Like I have so many friends where they have amazing partners and they met their wife at the grocery store,
Yeah.
I met my girlfriend at, she was working, she's a server, and I started talking to her and we just hit it off, and here we are. Now she's pregnant with our baby.
Well, congrats. Oh, that's amazing, man. Love to hear it. And something you were saying a couple days ago, actually at dinner, was you wish you were single for longer in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And you wish you cut off relationships that you knew weren't going to go anywhere sooner.
I think the people pleasing we talked about earlier in work also applied to my personal life. So I wouldn't, I think you pretty quickly know in a relationship in the first 6 to 12 months, is this someone that I would actually really want to be with? Like, the question I would always ask myself is like, if she told me she was pregnant, how would I feel about that? And there's girls that I've been with where I go, that would be okay. It's not the end of the world. Like, she'd be a good mom and whatever. But I definitely dated some women where I was like, no, like that would ruin my life, and like I don't want to be with this person, and she'd be a terrible mother or whatever. And I wasted a lot of time with those people for whatever reason, because I couldn't do the hard thing. I couldn't fire people. I couldn't end my relationships. And so yeah, I do wish that I just had more exposure and calibration. I think every person you date calibrates your system, and the more people you date, including the bad people, the more you get a sense of what the landscape is. And going back to anchoring, I started, some of my early girlfriends, they were great people in lots of ways, but we were a terrible match. And so my bar got set low, I think, in terms of what is a good relationship, because those relationships were so hard that over the time in my 20s, I started dating people and they weren't great for me, but I was going, well, they're definitely better than that terrible relationship. So, the psychology piece of anchoring and comparison definitely matters. And so I think getting as much experience as you possibly can from 18 to 25 or whatever, and learning the other counterbalance though is like, you also need to have enough data to know what it's like to, I love I'm saying data like a business nerd, but you need to know enough to also know how to be in a relationship. So it's like if you're just dating people constantly, but you never know what it's like to live with someone or go through a hard thing with someone or be a good partner, that's also going to be a problem. So it's a real dance. There's a great book on this called The Defining Decade by Meg Jay.
Right.
And it's all about how your 20s are this time where you're launching your plane and you're taking off. Let's say you're in New York, you're taking off, and the difference between like 3 degrees this way or 3 degrees this way is ending up in Tijuana versus Seattle, right? And it's like you want to end up in Seattle, not Tijuana. Maybe Tijuana's nice, I don't know, but I've heard it's not very nice. And yeah, so I think like paying attention to that, thinking really hard about your 20s is important.
Are you happy with the way you spent your 20s?
Yeah, because I mean, it's the classic story of like, well, because I ended up here, right? It's like saying like, well, are you happy that your parents, messed up in XYZ way? Most people say, well, yeah, that's hard, but I'm glad that happened the way it did, because now I'm the way I am and I'm happy about the way I am, or it gives me these superpowers or gifts. So yeah, I definitely am. But I also look back and like roll my eyes and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I wasted so much time.
We're always going to make mistakes, and even if like you look back and maybe there were a few things that you could have changed or you could have done better, like the way that you spend that time is what made you now.
Totally. And I think, there's one-way doors and there's two-way doors, and I think most things are two-way doors, right? You can reverse them, including like getting married to the wrong person, right? So I got married, I got divorced. That's a two-way door, right? But having permanent facial surgery or doing some crazy, making a crazy decision you can't reverse. That's something to really think about. And so I think the nice thing about most of my mistakes in my 20s, they're reversible or things that you can change over time. It's really the irreversible decisions, like I decided to go skydiving and now I'm in a wheelchair, that people regret.
What do you think's been your biggest accomplishment that either other people can't see from the outside or the most people overlook?
Well, I mean, the biggest accomplishment that I feel, there's the cheesy answer of like having kids, right? We were talking about this the other day at lunch with some people, and having kids, it's hilarious because it sounds so stupid when you tell this to someone who doesn't have kids usually, but there's something about it. If you think about all of our drivers in life, almost everything leads to sex or community or things that enable you to have a family, right? And we spend so much time thinking about that, but we don't make the connection that we need to. That's our biology driving us to have children. And so just like when you're starving, you're like starving, you're driven to eat food. You eat food, you feel amazing, right? When you're starving and you finally eat food and you listen to your biology and your body, it feels really good. And so I found the moment that I held my son in my arms and I saw his face and it looked like my face, it was just the craziest thing. It was like someone had injected like MDMA into my brain, and the feeling I had was like, oh, none of this matters. Like none of the work, none of the maniacal desire to try and like make a dent in the universe or build a great business or any of these things, none of that mattered. The only thing was this little baby. And so that is this achievement that is not very exciting for people to hear because it's so boring. But when I hear people say they don't want kids, I'm always like, that's cool. Like, you make your own choices, but it's such a great hack to feel that you've made this big accomplishment when, let's be real, you haven't. Most people have kids and it's not really, it's not impressive, but it does achieve the biological feeling of satisfaction that exceeds anything else. Like I remember my dad said, my greatest accomplishment is having you boys. And I was like, Dad, that is so lame. Like, are you kidding me? And then now I get it. I totally get it. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that is a big piece. And then another one is just conquering anxiety. I had so much anxiety for so long, and I really lived in a prison of my own making where I would spend all my time, obsessively worrying about business or a social situation at work or someone I had upset or maybe thinking I was going to die of a brain tumor or whatever it was. There's always something that I was really anxious about, and figuring that out and not feeling it anymore has been like the most profound achievement for me. And it's so funny looking at it and being like, I've got this tweet that's like, most successful people are just an anxiety disorder harnessed for productivity. That was certainly me. So conquering that has been really meaningful for me.
Mm-hmm. And that's been done mainly with the medication.
Ironically, right? It's like not hard. It's like take a little pill, and that has really resolved it. And I do wonder, like, you mentioned earlier that you have ADHD, and it's like, if you medicate, people worry that they'll like take away your fire or something. And it's an interesting question.
That's definitely a worry of mine, yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question. Let's say your fire is anxiety. And it's like, okay, let's say you can spend your 20s feeling really anxious and dissatisfied, but it'll make you successful. Or you can just turn off the anxiety now. And you'll still be successful, but you won't be as successful. what's better? And like for me, I think if you told me that before I took the medication, I'd be like, no, I don't want it. But now that I take the medication, I'm like, oh man, like when people say, people will often say like, well, you know, what if the drugs turn out to like take years off your life, right? Let's say I just say, I'd rather live 10 years less, but not have anxiety than live an extra 20 years. You know, it's like, it's so good to not feel that.
Yeah, I think as much as I hate to admit it, like my answer to that right now is like, I just want to be dissatisfied my entire 20s and have the most success possible. And I'm not too sure if like that's something that I have to go through it, feel the pain, realize I made a mistake, and that's how I learn, or I just like admit that I'm wrong now.
Well, it's hard because like 5 ants, for example,
Yeah.
it actually gives you motivation and it makes you want to focus and it makes you want to work. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but like I take an SSRI as well.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, yeah, it takes away the feeling, the driver a little bit. But I don't know. I think you should try Vyvanse, dude. I think you'd really enjoy it.
You gotta give me one of yours.
I saw one of your tweets where you were talking about you got this guy to do a full psychological audit of you, like asking you all these questions, talking to everybody you knew. How did that turn out?
It was fascinating. So I have a friend who's an investor, and he said that the most impactful thing he's ever done in the last 10 years was working with this guy named Jack Skeen,
Yeah.
who does what he calls the blueprint. And basically what he does is he does a whole bunch of like tests, so like, you know, psychological tests on you, and then he spends like 6 hours interviewing you, and then he interviews all of your friends. So it's
Right.
like your friends and your coworkers, anyone you spend a lot of time with, and then they all talk about you and all, you know, what are your problems, how can you improve. So it's like doing a 360 review on your life, but then also taking into account all of your personality traits and, you know, all the data and stuff. And what came out of it was really interesting. My friends felt like you know, let's say your friend calls you up and he's like, hey, will you help me move? I would probably be like, oh no, like I won't help you move, but I'll hire a mover for you. And it's like, what my friend really wants is me to be like, yeah, dude, I got you. Like I'll come and I'll do the hard thing. And the way that he put it to me is he's like, you know, your friends want to mow the lawn with you and then have a cold beer afterwards, but you won't even you'll never have the cold beer with them. You won't engage in that with them. So there's this weird thing I was doing where I was distancing myself from people by not engaging and not rolling up my sleeves, and I thought that was really interesting. And then there's a lot of stuff around my need to my kind of traits of people pleasing and stuff in my marriage where he was like, yeah, you're not acting like a king, you're acting like a stable boy. She's the queen and you're the stable boy. So there's all these like fascinating dynamics that he was pulling out of my life from all the things I was telling him, and it ended up making for a lot of major changes in my life.
Yeah.
You know, I realized that there's a lot of things I was doing that were not making me happy. That also I was not happy in my relationship, which I already knew, but it was a kind of something that pushed me to separate. And it's crazy to look at. Like, it was definitely this turning point in my life where I did it and it was horrible. Like, I remember reading the document and just hearing all the negative things that people think about me and stuff. But there was a lot of truth in it, and it forced a lot of change. And yeah, it was quite impactful.
What did you do to get rid of that emotional distance that you're creating with your friends and people around you?
Well, I realized that, you know, to go back to the money thing, you know, people think that they're going to make, especially young men, it's like they think they're going to buy a nice car and buy a nice house, and then they'll be like Vinny Chase from Entourage. Like, all of a sudden you'll have all these buddies and everything's going to be great and girls are going to like you. What I found was actually that people view you as different. They view you as not like them, because if you're wealthy and they're not, they feel like you're different. You're in another stratosphere. You're in another world, And it's very complicated. Like, when you go out for dinner, let's say you have a lot of money and you go out for dinner with a friend and his girlfriend, if you don't pick up the check, you're kind of a prick because you can afford to. But if you do pick up the check, you're alphaing him. And you're saying, what, you think I can't afford it? Right? And so it's this thing where you're like, okay, well, I guess the answer is to not pick up the check and to split always, right? And that would be an example of a very subtle thing that I would do to not create any kind of schism. I'd just be like, let's split. Let's keep it easy, right? And maybe people think you're an asshole for splitting even, right? Another thing is like, I've got a big, nice house. I don't invite people over to my house unless I know them reasonably well, because I don't want to color them thinking I'm like some wacky rich person, right? I just want to be a guy in a cafe who's nice and normal and talks to them like a human, and then they can judge me, and then maybe once they get to know me, sure, I'll bring them over to my house or whatever. And another example is like I do like trips with buddies sometimes, and there's been times where I'm like, well, like, I can afford it, so guys, let me upgrade our hotel. I'll take you guys to an even nicer hotel. Let me pay for it. Creates a weird dynamic. Now they feel like beholden to me, and I'm paying more, and it's kind of like I'm at the top. We're not all equal, and so there's been a lot of lessons from those things where I remember when I was in high school, I was always the kid that needed to bum a dollar, right? It's like, hey, can I borrow $1 for a Coke? And I remember always thinking like, when I get rich, I'm gonna be so generous. I'm gonna like help all my friends and pay for stuff and help people out. And you realize pretty quick that all those things actually really distance you from others. That unfortunately, like, hooking your friends up usually creates resentment and complexity. And really, you just want to be like a normal person.
What do you think's the balance of that? Because it's like, on one hand, you want to do good for your friends, you want to hook them up, you want to upgrade their hotel, but then it's like you don't want to be like the guy who's trying to alpha them. Or,
well, imagine how you feel if you're going through a hard time and your buddy goes, "Hey man, here's $1,000 for your rent." You might in that moment be like, wow, what a good friend.
Yeah.
But you're going to start feeling a bit awkward pretty quick, right? You're going to start feeling like, fuck, like, do I have to make sure he knows how thankful I am. And now, does he want the money back? And it starts to shift your dynamic a bit. You're a bit nervous when you see him, and you're always reassuring him, don't worry, I'm working really hard and I'll get you your money back, right? It's like, all these weird dynamics can play out. And don't get me wrong, the lesson is not never help your friends, but it would be better, in my opinion, to secretly help your friend. So it's like, you structure something so some random person that they barely know ends up being the person that hooks them up and I haven't done this, I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that it benefits relationships to insert money into them. I think you see this with families. So like people that have a lot of money, you can have the warmest, most lovely family, but if you have like a family cabin and there's 3 different families, like 3 different siblings, they'll fight over the cabin and how it gets dealt with or whatever. Or if the parents have money, they fight over the business or where the wealth goes or whatever it is. So I think like money in general is a toxic force for friendships and family.
And you feel like you owe the person too. Like, it might not be fully conscious, but in the back of your head, it's like someone does something for you, and it's like the law of reciprocity from influence.
Totally.
Yeah, you feel like you have to do something for them, so subconsciously you're kind of going to be walking on eggshells or trying to do them little favors, etc. And I remember like a week or so ago, I bought one of my friends like a pretty like expensive Christmas gift, and I was like trying to do everything in my power to make them like not know it was me, to like do it anonymously, but like the person told me like, oh no, you gotta tell them yourself, and I was like, oh man, because I knew like that's just gonna make the dynamic so weird.
Well, it's literally like the difference between you're here and then you do this, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have one-upped them without meaning to, and it's a really awkward dynamic. I mean, people always criticize rich people for hanging out with other rich people, right? They're always like, oh, it's all the rich people hanging out. And you know why rich people hang out? Because the only people that they can talk about their problems with, because they have rich people problems, are other rich people. And the only people who there's no weird dynamic like that with, where you can go out for dinner and not worry whether you're trying to alpha one another and
Yeah.
paying is other rich people. And so it's a dangerous game where if you aren't careful about not introducing money into your friendships, you'll find yourself hanging out with a bunch of rich dickwads. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of nice rich people out there, but like I don't like the idea of only hanging out with rich people.
It really narrows your perspective as well. Like when you, or I don't think that's even just for rich people. It's like when you only hang out with one certain kind of person, it's kind of like an echo chamber of beliefs.
Totally. Well, I mean, like that's often the case with entrepreneurs because very few people can share the stress of running a business. You end up hanging out with other entrepreneurs. Other entrepreneurs, you have certain political beliefs, or they always kind of seem to have certain archetypes or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you forget that the rest of the world exists. You don't get other perspectives. And it's great. I think it's like playing like soccer. If you get really into soccer, you have a shared language and a way to make friends with people, but you do get into this bubble in business specifically.
No, and I've definitely been finding that in business. So it's so important to just get different perspectives.
Well, yeah, if you only hang out with people who think Elon Musk is awesome, you're going to go out in the world and talk to someone, and I think Elon Musk is awesome in all sorts of ways, but you forget that the rest of the world hates him or thinks he's bad about this other thing or whatever. And it's not that you should not say you like him, but you should know all the beliefs and understand them. And you just kind of get into this warped world where without even realizing it, you speak this other language, and by speaking this other language you alienate yourself amongst other people.
What do you think's a belief that you might have held strongly when you're first starting out your business, or a belief that you were super convicted about in the past that you've now changed your mind on?
Well, I really felt bootstrapping was really important.
Yeah.
And I think bootstrapping is like a wonderful principle, the idea that you should not be reliant on external money, that you should use your own cash to do things. But I think it's like idiotic sometimes. Like the example I always give is like, let's say you have a cafe and you have a TikTok video that blows up where you are making a certain type of croissant and you're just going viral. There's just lines out the door. It's a phenomenon. You only have one oven and you need another oven, but it's $200,000. Right? You know that if you just get the $200,000, you can pay yourself back in like a month for that oven, but you don't have the cash. Should you go to investors or get debt? Of course you should, right? But there's other people that like they take that to the extreme. They say like, you should always raise money from investors and whatever. And I think it's just there's a million different ways of doing things, but I was very dogmatic and almost like religious about it. I was like, no, you should always bootstrap, which I think is ridiculous now.
What do you think has been the weirdest rich person party that you've ever attended that you can speak about here?
Well, I mean, I've had some pretty weird experiences. Like I talked about this one on My First Million, but a couple years ago, I went to the Vanity Fair Oscars party. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
So that's like, for those that don't know, it's like the party that all the celebrities go to after the Oscars. And it's like 97% famous people and then like 3% random, and most of the people that are there that are random are like, they're billionaires or they're, some massive entertainment mogul that maybe normal people wouldn't know, but everyone there would know. And I was able to finagle access to it, and I realized very quickly that you don't want to be in a room that you don't deserve to be in. It's not cool. It's like, again, it goes back to like buying the Olympic gold medal on eBay, right? It's like I was able to get in because I had money, but I wasn't anybody in that room. Like no one gave a shit about I didn't own Letterboxd at the time, right? So it was like I had no involvement in film whatsoever. And I remember there was one guy there who, this guy Paul Scheer, he's an awesome comedian, and he had an MTV show back in the day, and I designed the website for the MTV show. So I was like, oh, someone I actually know. And so I walk over to him and I'm like, dude, like this is so random, but I designed your website in like 2008 or whatever. And he just goes, what the fuck are you doing here? Right? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I had no good answer.
Yeah.
Other than like, I don't know, like I'm just, I managed to get in here, right? And that was bizarre. I mean, I was like standing at the bar next to Jeff Bezos, and then Andrew Garfield is next to me, and then Michelle Yeoh, and every like The Weeknd. It's like every famous person is there, and what's so interesting about it as well is like you don't want to be in a room you don't belong in, obviously, but then also all these beautiful like celebrities, they look like normal people. Like none of them, I wouldn't say any of them were like stunningly, incredibly handsome or beautiful. They're so famous and made up in their movies or whatever that we think of them as like perfect. But when you see them in person, they're just like normal people. So that was a very weird experience for me to go to that event, and I don't know that I'd want to experience that again, right? On the flip side, I've definitely gone and hung out with lots of very wealthy people. I haven't had any weird experiences where like, somebody brings out like a bunch, it's not like Wolf of Wall Street parties or something like that. One thing I'd say is that most of the people I know that are super rich are not doing very exciting things.
Yeah.
They're kind of generally a bit boring or isolated. They live in these huge houses. They have crazy security teams. They aren't able to go out in public sometimes because they're so famous, or they're in danger or whatever. So that's a bizarre experience, and I would say that the people I have the most fun hanging out with are not the big names. They're just normal entrepreneurs. Like I have a great community in Victoria of just local entrepreneurs that I love, and I would have the most fun partying with them. Because there's not ego. There's so much ego as you go up the ladder. Like when you start to get meeting people where they have a name that everyone knows.
Yeah.
Like often, don't get me wrong, there's tons of amazing people, but a lot of them definitely have ego and status, and they become they're like an actor, like a famous actor, where like when you meet them, people have expectation of who they are, and I find that a very weird thing.
What do you think has been the most you've spent on night out?
Oh man, I mean, like, going to the Oscars, like doing all that was like, I think it was $100,000 or something like that. Like to go to attend, getting a crazy tux and donating to get seats and all that stuff. Like I've definitely had those experiences, and I just feel gross afterwards.
Really?
Like I definitely had this phase like 4 or 5 years ago where I was like, yeah, like I'd been pretty conservative. I hadn't really spent a lot of money irresponsibly.
Yeah.
And I was like, let me try a few things. So I like chartered a yacht with some friends, like did the Oscars thing and a few other things. I just felt nasty afterwards.
Really?
Like lighting, you go on a yacht I think we were on a yacht for 4 or 5 days, and it was like $250,000. And it's like, what? Like that's like a lawyer would work for an entire year to make that much money, and I just spent it on like fuel. And why? So that I could like be in a floating hotel in the middle of the ocean. Like why? Like why did I do that? I just felt gross, and I get that same gross feeling from like owning multiple houses and having like the house sit empty, or owning like 3 or 4 amazing cars and they like never get driven. I just feel guilty. So over the last couple of years, I've really cut down on all that stuff.
How do you think that's made you feel, cutting down on all that?
Well, I'd say it makes me feel great. I think that knowing that you don't need the things that you need to keep, I guess the way I'd put it is knowing you don't need the things that to get you would have to keep working is really nice. So like for a long time I was like, okay, I want to buy a plane. I want to have 5 houses. I want all my favorite cities. I want to own a house. Like all these things where it's just like these irrational desires that are made up, that I don't even know why I would want that. Like, do I need a plane? Like, why do I need to own a plane? Do I fly that much? I fly like once a month, once every 2 months. Like, I don't need to own a plane, right? Do I really plan to spend more than like 2 weeks a year in LA? Is it important that when I stay in a house that all my stuff is there? Is that worth having an empty house for an entire year and spending $1 million, $2 million on maintenance and mortgage and all this stuff? And so it's been very freeing for me to kind of like get to where I would deem like the maximum I could possibly spend to enjoy myself.
Yeah.
And realize like, oh, I don't even need that much. I don't enjoy that. None of that brings me joy. And so for me, like, I spend money however I want. I do whatever I want, but I've realized like I really don't need more than, $2-3 million a year, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, people get into this thing where they're like, I want to be a billionaire. And it's like, well, tell me why you want to be a billionaire, other than the idea of like, you're a billionaire, right? You've hit the 3 commas club or whatever. And most people think it's because they're like, well, I want to be able to do anything. And it's like, well, really, like, it's pretty hard to spend more than like $3 million, $4 million a year, unless you do really, really dumb, wasteful things like buy a Formula One team that you just because you wanted to or whatever. So from my perspective, I think like most people that want to get really rich are like overshooting. It's like, no, you could make like 25 million, 30 million, and like you're killing it. Like you're living the best life ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find all that stuff just makes me feel icky.
Which do you think are the few purchases that have actually made a good impact on your life?
Well, I think anything, honestly, it's so funny. Like the best thing ever for me is having a cleaner. So
Yeah.
not having to clean my own house, because I hate
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
ADHD, it's like impossible. I hate it. And that's saved me mostly from fighting with my partner, because I feel like if we had to do it together, I'd be like I'd be a bad partner to do that with. So having a cleaner's been great. Having a comfortable car, but like I own a Tesla, like it's not a crazy car. That's great. That's like where I've maxed out. I'm like, this is the best car I could ever get, basically. And I've had lots of super cars and dumb stuff too, and that's where I've landed. Having a house on the water, I really like. I remember a friend told me that there's a study where they showed that no matter where you live, you get used to the house, but you never get used to a view. And I have a beautiful view, so I really appreciate every single day I sit on my back steps, rain or shine, and I do gratitudes with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Love that. And then the freedom to be able to cancel a trip. Like, so for example, like let's say I'm on a 10-day trip, I could wake up on day 8 and just be like, I want to go home. And just having the money to just like make changes or lose money on a hotel or whatever. I love that freedom. Otherwise, I don't know that there's... Oh, and I will say like flying private, which you can like charter or do fractional or whatever, is very, very nice. But mostly only because I live in Victoria. Like the connections add a lot of time. But I think if I lived in a major city, I don't even know if I'd care that much about that.
What do you find the benefits are of flying private?
You just roll up and you go. So it's
Sure.
just a time thing, right? Like when you fly private, you drive right up to the aircraft, you get out of your car, you load up, and you go. And it's just, you're just immediately there. I don't mind sitting on a plane. That's no big deal. Like a commercial airline, I don't know. I like talking to people. I like doing that. It's the waiting in the airport, the connections, the drive, all the time that you waste going through security and stuff. It's the difference between like, if I went to Palm Springs, I could leave at 9 in the morning and arrive at like 4 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon, versus I leave 9 flying private and I'm there at like 11:30. So it's like, it makes a big difference.
The last question that I like to ask to all the guests that come on this podcast is, what do you want to be remembered for after you die?
I think the only thing, I'm like a total nihilist. Like I truly believe my life is totally meaningless and pointless. The only thing that I care about is that I hope my kids think I was a good dad. And that's such a cheesy answer, but like, I think that's the only thing, honestly, that I care about. Otherwise, I don't care. Because I think like a lot of that stuff where people get caught up on legacy, where it's like, oh, I'm going to be like this great philanthropist, or I'm going to like found a university or whatever. Like, oh, that's fine. That's good. And I plan to do some philanthropy and do all that stuff. But I think they get very caught up in what will people think about me after I die. And like, to me, I'm like, well, you'll be dead. Who cares? Right? Like, all I care about is like, will my kids think I was an asshole, basically, which... So far, so good, but, got to keep working on that.
Well, Andrew, it was amazing to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, that was fun, man.
I really appreciate it, man.
Of course.
All right. And I have his book somewhere. So Andrew, he wrote one of my favorite books. I've read it like 3 times now. I think a fourth time to prepare for this podcast. But I would highly recommend it. It's him talking about his entire story, how he went from zero to the place that he's in today. I find it extremely inspiring, and I think the main thing that I got from reading his book was I really just saw myself in him. I was like, wow, this guy like came from such a similar place to me. He's also from Victoria, and if he can do it, then why can't I? So it was so helpful for just making me believe myself a lot more, and I'd highly recommend anyone check it out.
Thanks,
Yeah.
dude. Glad you liked it.
Yeah, man. Loved it.